The dynamic between my parents, my younger sister Lisa, and me has always felt incredibly unbalanced, and finally, after years of trying to make them see the truth, events have unfolded that have brought to light what I've known all along about her nature. I'm 23 years old, and Lisa is 18, but her behavior often feels so much more sinister and manipulative than one would expect from someone her age. It's as if she embodies the worst traits a person can have, and I've struggled for years to make my parents acknowledge the truth behind her facade. For a bit of background, my relationship with my parents has always been somewhat strained, largely due to the adoration they shower on Lisa. Their unwavering affection for her stems from a painful loss they endured when my mother had a miscarriage before Lisa was born. This loss deeply impacted my mother, and when Lisa came along a few years later, she was seen as a miracle, a bright light that healed the wounds of their grief. This perception placed Lisa at the center of our family's universe, and the endless love and attention they dedicated to her turned her into the focal point of our household. While I did love Lisa as a child, it didn't take long for me to notice her remarkable ability to manipulate situations to her advantage, a skill that seemed to escape the notice of my parents. Lisa mastered the art of twisting narratives to make herself look like the victim, and this talent manifested in numerous ways throughout our childhood. One vivid memory that stands out is my birthday celebration when I received a beautiful antique pocket watch from our grandparents. It was a cherished gift, steeped in family history, and naturally, I was overjoyed. However, Lisa, consumed by jealousy, insisted that I share it with her. When I firmly declined, since it was a gift meant for me, she resorted to underhanded tactics. That night, knowing I had a deep fear of spiders, Lisa placed one inside my pillowcase, ensuring that I would have the fright of my life. As I pulled back the covers and felt the horrible sensation of something crawling on my skin, I screamed in terror, prompting my parents to rush to my aid. Meanwhile, Lisa feigned surprise and concern, putting on an act that only highlighted her deceitful nature. Later, when we were alone, she confessed with a disturbing grin that she had orchestrated the entire ordeal to teach me a lesson, leaving me utterly shocked and horrified by her lack of remorse. Another instance that exemplifies her cruelty occurred when I invited my crush, Mark, over to watch a movie. I was excited and felt beautiful in my carefully chosen outfit. Yet, as soon as Mark arrived at our house, Lisa made it her mission to ruin the moment. She intentionally spilled juice all over my dress, laughing all the while, and I was left mortified, scrambling to change while trying to conceal my embarrassment. As if that humiliation wasn't enough, she went on to share the most embarrassing stories from my childhood, making sure Mark could see how uncomfortable I was. By the end of the evening, Mark couldn't wait to leave. Lisa's parting comment, suggesting he could find someone better, stung deeply and underscored her relentless cruelty. Over the years, I attempted to share my concerns about Lisa's behavior with my parents, but every time, they dismissed my experiences as typical sibling rivalry or attributed her actions to youthful naivety. They simply could not grasp the reality of her manipulative nature. Whenever I voiced my frustrations, they labeled me as the troublemaker, which only served to alienate me further. As a result, I eventually ceased to speak up, watching in frustration as Lisa continued to bask in their favoritism while I felt increasingly like an outsider within my own family. I chose to focus on my studies and worked hard to gain admission to a good college, which allowed me the opportunity to move out and escape our family dynamics. However, every time I returned home during breaks, Lisa made it abundantly clear that she loathed my presence. She would intentionally ignore me, sparing not even the briefest acknowledgement during family meals. More often than not, she would avoid sitting next to me and instead disrupt any attempts I made to engage in conversation with my parents. Her actions communicated her disdain, making it painfully evident that she aimed to make my visits as uncomfortable as possible. To add to the chaos, she would even disturb my belongings, further illustrating her willingness to undermine my presence at every turn. It has taken years, but the latest events surrounding a family vacation, in which Lisa's true nature was laid bare when she got arrested, have finally opened my parents' eyes. They are beginning to grasp the extent of her manipulations, and while it's taken a drastic turn for them to realize the truth, I can only hope this newfound awareness can change the course of our family dynamics moving forward. Pretending to need to borrow things became a regular pattern in my sister Lisa's behavior. She would often ask for items, only to either damage them or lose them entirely. This ongoing cycle of taking and wrecking became a significant source of frustration for me. However, when I attempted to voice my complaints to our parents, they simply brushed my concerns aside, insisting that I should make an effort to get along with my sister. Their dismissal left me feeling unheard and invalidated, leading me to make a conscious decision to avoid returning home during school breaks. I started crafting excuses to spend my holidays with the families of my college friends instead. The truth is, my parents didn't seem to mind too much. They interpreted my choice as a sign of my independence, thinking that I simply wanted some space and the opportunity to enjoy life outside of our family dynamics. When Lisa graduated from high school, her academic performance didn't quite meet the requirements for college. Consequently, she enrolled in a community college, which conveniently allowed her to stay living at our parents' house rather than pursuing a more independent life. Meanwhile, I found myself thriving in my career at a multinational corporation in San Francisco, where I genuinely enjoyed the work I was doing. Though I occasionally touched base with my parents, I rarely found myself visiting our home. My relationship with Lisa had deteriorated to the point where I maintained absolutely no contact with her. The situation took a serious turn when my father recently experienced a near-fatal heart attack. By some miracle, he survived and was quickly rushed to the hospital. The moment my mother called to inform me of the crisis, I immediately booked a flight back home to be there for both of them during this challenging time. After being discharged, my father was prescribed multiple medications and was strongly encouraged by the doctors to begin exercising regularly. He expressed a newfound desire to spend more time as a family, reflecting on how fortunate he was to have been saved from the brink of death. Understanding my father's perspective, I decided to stay for a few days at our family home. My job offered the flexibility of remote work, so I had the luxury to accommodate this unexpected visit. However, I quickly noticed that Lisa seemed to be deeply unsettled by my presence. Despite my best efforts to steer clear of her, hoping to avoid conflict given the recent family upheaval, tensions were palpable. One morning, during breakfast, my father proposed a family vacation, citing how long it had been since we had last traveled together as a unit. While I initially had reservations about this proposal, I recognized its significance to my father and chose to agree. Lisa, on the other hand, didn't share the same enthusiasm. Nevertheless, she had little choice but to go along with the plans my father had made. My father took charge of all the arrangements, including booking our flights and accommodations. I had already notified my colleagues in advance so they wouldn't expect me to be available during our family getaway. I genuinely looked forward to a short break filled with quality time alongside my parents. However, upon arriving at the airport, I discovered that my flight ticket had been cancelled. Confusion set in as I exchanged bewildered looks with my father, who continued to insist that he had indeed booked and paid for my ticket. After further investigation, it became clear that, out of the 4 tickets he had secured, mine had been mysteriously cancelled. As I tried to piece together what had occurred, I glanced over at Lisa, who was sporting a sly smile, one that I recognized all too well. It was the same expression she wore whenever she had successfully pulled off one of her manipulative schemes. In that moment, it dawned on me that Lisa had to be the one behind the cancellation of my ticket, likely accessing our father's computer without his knowledge. Angered by the realization, I couldn't help but confront her. She continued to smile while I pointed out the obvious, to our parents, that it was Lisa's doing. To my dismay, instead of supporting me, my mother swiftly dismissed my claims, saying that Lisa would never resort to such behavior. She insisted it was simply a freak accident and chastised me for what she deemed jealousy of my younger sister. My father echoed her sentiments, suggesting it might just have been an error on the airline's part. At that moment, I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. It was incredibly disheartening that my parents couldn't believe that their miracle child could be responsible for such a deceitful act. Left with no recourse, I realized my ticket was already cancelled, and there were no other flights available for that day. While I could have taken a flight the following day, I found the idea of returning home unappealing. The entire situation had introduced an unexpected level of tension that I was not ready to face. Booking a new flight and preparing to embark on a journey alone was not a decision I made lightly, especially since this trip was originally intended to be a family outing. The thought of sharing a room with Lisa during this trip filled me with dread. I had held out hope that she had matured over the years, but if she was indeed responsible for my flight ticket being cancelled, I couldn't shake off the nagging fear about what other schemes she might concoct to ruin my experience. My father, who was initially hesitant about embarking on the trip without me, suggested that they could simply return home and plan a new vacation at a later date. However, as he began to discuss how long it had been since he had last enjoyed a holiday, his tone shifted. My mother chimed in, indicating that since I traveled frequently for work, I wouldn't be missing much by not joining them on this trip. Their comments struck a nerve, making me feel as though they were subtly encouraging me to be the one to insist that they continue with their plans without me. In an effort to ease the tension, I told them they were welcome to proceed with the vacation if that was what they wanted. To my surprise, they readily agreed, not hesitating to express their relief. While I didn't want the money they spent on the tickets and accommodations to go to waste, it was disheartening to realize they seemed indifferent about whether I joined them or not. It became increasingly clear that they were fully comfortable heading off as a family of 3 while leaving me behind. And so, there I stood at the airport, feeling utterly alone, as my parents and Lisa departed for their much-anticipated getaway. Opting to return to my home in San Francisco rather than spend an additional day alone in our family house, I tried my best to put the entire incident behind me. With the time I had already taken off work, I made a concerted effort to enjoy the rest of my leave. I reconnected with old friends and allowed myself to get lost in books, transforming my break into a fulfilling solo retreat. Throughout their trip, my parents would occasionally video call me, and each time, it became painfully evident just how much they were enjoying themselves in my absence. It felt as though my lack of presence had little to no impact on their vacation. Although I didn't feel outright heartbroken about missing the trip, a persistent feeling of exclusion lingered. It was yet another reminder of the favoritism that had always been a part of our family dynamic. I held on to the hope that, someday, they would see through Lisa's true nature and recognize the pattern of manipulation she had been weaving. Days into their vacation, I awoke to a series of missed calls from my mother, each one amplifying my concern. I quickly returned her call, relieved when she answered, but the distress in her voice was palpable. She explained that something deeply troubling had unfolded. My parents had discovered that my father's critical heart medications were mysteriously disappearing, day by day. This was alarming, as he relied on these medications for his fragile health. Their concern escalated, particularly since they were in a foreign country and uncertain whether they could find replacements for his essential medicine. They searched their room thoroughly, but their efforts yielded no results. In a moment of desperation, my mother went to Lisa's hotel room, which was conveniently next door to theirs, to borrow some sunscreen. To her utter shock, she stumbled upon all the missing medications neatly tucked away in Lisa's bedside table. This chilling revelation sent waves of panic through her, and she immediately called my father to confirm what she had found. He rushed over and verified the situation. It was in that moment that the truth began to dawn on them. Their beloved daughter, the so-called miracle child, had intentionally jeopardized my father's health and put him at great risk. My mother's voice trembled as she asked me if they should confront Lisa about this alarming discovery. I advised her to hold off on talking to Lisa until they returned home. They needed time to gather their thoughts and collect evidence to confront her with the undeniable truth. I knew that discussing it with Lisa at that moment would be futile. She was adept at manipulation and would surely devise excuse after excuse to deflect blame. However, it seemed that something unexpected happened after that. My parents must have confronted Lisa about her actions because later that evening, I received a late-night call from my father. The tension in his voice indicated that the situation had escalated in ways I couldn't yet imagine. A late-night call from my father shattered the calm of the evening, his voice shaking and barely above a whisper as he delivered shocking news: Lisa was in jail. I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me as he continued to explain the chaotic sequence of events that led to this moment. Apparently, during a routine inquiry about her medications, Lisa had erupted into a full-fledged tantrum. She had thrown objects around the room and unleashed a torrent of insults, primarily directed towards my father. Her outbursts were fueled by a festering resentment, particularly regarding a ticket he had booked for me to join them on their family vacation. Lisa accused him of a grave betrayal, claiming that he should have never allowed me to come along. The situation escalated when Lisa threatened my parents, saying that if they continued their relationship with me, she would take action to ensure they would never forget the lesson she would teach them. As her fury grew, the hotel staff became alarmed and ultimately decided to call the authorities. When the police arrived, Lisa's rage showed no signs of subsiding. She insulted the officers, which eventually led to her being arrested and taken into custody. Fortunately, she would be released within 24 hours, leaving my parents in a state of helplessness as they awaited her return. Feeling desperate to leave the foreign country as soon as possible after Lisa's release, my parents attempted to reschedule their flight. However, their plans were abruptly thwarted when they discovered that both their passports and wallets had mysteriously disappeared. It turned out that Lisa had either discarded their passports in a fit of rage or hidden them away, leaving my parents stranded without any form of identification or access to their money. This incident marked a critical turning point for them, as they began to see Lisa in a new, more troubling light. My mother, who had always defended Lisa through every chaotic episode, was now overwhelmed and pleading with me for help. She was distraught and shocked, grappling with the stark reality of her daughter's alarming behavior. I reassured them, telling them not to worry and that I would send them money through Western Union, but they needed to locate their passports first so they could make their way back home. Deep down, I was convinced that Lisa had not truly discarded their passports. My parents were finally starting to understand that I had been honest about her antics all along, and they expressed gratitude for my willingness to help them despite their earlier decision to exclude me from this vacation. While part of me wanted to forgive my parents for their past mistakes, a larger part struggled with lingering resentment. For years, I felt deprived of their love and attention, always overshadowed by my sister's favoritism. Now, after experiencing this unfortunate turn of events, they were returning to me, asking for my forgiveness. Daily updates from my parents heightened my anxiety about their situation. After Lisa was released from jail, my parents confronted her with an ultimatum: return their passports or they would contact the authorities once again. Faced with no other option, Lisa reluctantly revealed the location where she had hidden their passports. Upon their return home, my parents had a serious confrontation with Lisa, making it clear that it was time for her to gather her belongings and leave their house. It was unmistakable that they had reached their breaking point, finally recognizing the manipulative and harmful nature of her behavior. They feared that Lisa's actions could jeopardize their health, especially since she had a history of stealing medications that my father relied on. This confrontation sparked yet another screaming match. Lisa unleashed a barrage of accusations toward my parents, her anger boiling over as she expressed her feelings of neglect and resentment. She claimed that she didn't want to share them with anyone, insisting that she was more than enough for both of them. In her desperation, she threatened to accuse them of neglect during her childhood, claiming they had mistreated her when she was growing up. Her threats to go to the police and fabricate stories about parental neglect revealed the depths of her jealousy and resentment toward me. At that moment, the reality of her actions became painfully clear to my parents. Lisa's manipulative behavior had taken a toll on our family, and they were finally beginning to see it for what it was. As their confrontation reached its peak, it became evident that the dynamics within our family were about to change forever. Lisa made a shocking threat to report our parents to the police and falsely accuse them of wrongdoing if they persisted in requesting that she move out of their home. This threat created a genuine atmosphere of fear for my parents, a fear rooted in the possibility of fabricated allegations that could severely damage their reputations. As respected doctors within our community, the implications of such baseless accusations were particularly daunting. The mere thought of their hard-earned reputations being tarnished by lies left them feeling cornered and overwhelmed, resulting in increased anxiety and emotional strain over the past several days. Lisa's behavior has escalated, as she continues to impose additional stress on my parents. Her fury reached new heights when she discovered they had been in regular contact with me, leading her to lash out in anger by breaking dishes around the house. Even more troubling, she has taken to hiding their car keys, creating significant obstacles for them as they struggle to get to work each day. Just last night, my mother reached out to me in tears after yet another distressing incident occurred during dinner. In a fit of rage, Lisa unleashed a barrage of verbal attacks, demanding that my mother prepare a meal for her. When my mother, exhausted from a long day at work, declined her request, Lisa's temper boiled over, resulting in a destructive rampage where she began to break furniture. Following her outburst, Lisa locked herself in her room and blasted music at an ear-splitting volume, effectively preventing my parents from enjoying a peaceful night's sleep. This ongoing turmoil is taking a significant toll on my parents' emotional and mental well-being, and I find myself increasingly worried about the potential consequences of this volatile situation. Despite my hopes that my parents would recognize Lisa's troubling behavior for what it truly is, I now fear that she poses a tangible threat to their safety. Currently, I cannot return home, as doing so might provoke her further and incite even more aggressive confrontations. In light of the dire circumstances, I am urgently trying to persuade my parents to seek legal counsel to explore a permanent resolution to the turmoil we are experiencing. Pursuing a legal path appears to be the best option for safeguarding my parents and restoring a sense of peace in our family dynamic. In a surprising turn of events, Lisa was arrested, as many had speculated might happen given her increasingly erratic actions. One night, during a particularly heated argument, she confronted my parents with a knife, instilling a profound sense of fear in both of them. In that moment of terror, my parents had no choice but to call the police, who responded quickly and took Lisa into custody on charges of assault. With Lisa in custody, my parents recognized that it was time to take definitive action to ensure their safety and serenity. They consulted with an attorney, who provided guidance on the legal steps necessary to initiate Lisa's eviction from their home. They proceeded to file a formal eviction notice, clearly outlining the reasons for her departure and specifying a timeline for her to leave. Despite knowing how difficult this decision was, they felt it was crucial for their safety and peace of mind. Understanding the delicate nature of the situation, my parents chose not to pursue additional criminal charges against Lisa. Their primary goal was simply to have her move out. They also decided to bail her out of jail, but with the condition that they handed her the eviction notice, which contained all the necessary legal language detailing the grounds for her departure and the deadline for her to vacate the premises. They took meticulous care to ensure all protocols were followed accurately to prevent any potential legal complications that might arise from Lisa challenging their actions. Subsequently, they appeared in court with their attorney to commence the eviction process, which involved filing a lawsuit against their own daughter. This was an incredibly painful experience for my parents, as they grappled with feelings of sadness and guilt, aware that they were taking legal action against their daughter. After careful consideration, the court issued an official order mandating that Lisa vacate the family home. This ruling established that if she failed to leave voluntarily, my parents would have the legal right to evict her. Now, with the court's order in place, Lisa is expected to move out by next week. This prospect has brought a wave of relief to my parents, who have finally taken steps toward reclaiming their home and restoring peace to their lives. Although it has been a challenging journey, they are hopeful that once Lisa is no longer living with them, things will improve. Throughout this ordeal, I have maintained regular communication with my parents and am planning a trip to bring them to San Francisco for a few weeks. This will provide them with an opportunity to unwind and escape the stress that Lisa has inflicted upon them. I believe that a change of scenery, along with some quality time spent together, will greatly benefit them as they begin to heal from this distressing chapter in their lives. As I reflect on this situation, I have received an overwhelming number of responses to my updates, showcasing the concern and support from others who have been following my family's journey. Going through the comments under my recent post has been quite the undertaking, and it has taken me a fair amount of time to sift through the various insights and suggestions. A number of you have recommended that we should look into having Lisa assessed for potential mental health issues, considering her recent violent outbursts. However, there's a significant challenge in that since Lisa is an adult, we lack the authority to compel her to undergo a mental health evaluation against her wishes. Our concern is valid. We certainly do not want to exacerbate the current situation or make things even more complex than they already are. In my previous update, I mentioned that my parents made the decision to fly down to San Francisco for a few days to visit me. They took this trip as a much-needed break after the difficult months they have endured. Just yesterday evening, we found ourselves gathered around the dining table in my cozy apartment, and the atmosphere was filled with a mix of warmth and tension. As we shared a meal, my parents began to open up to me, their voices tinged with humility, deep regret, and the weight of their realizations. They confessed to being oblivious to Lisa's true nature over the years and expressed their heartfelt desire for my forgiveness. My father spoke candidly about his remorse for not paying attention to my earlier warnings about Lisa. He admitted that they had never anticipated the way she would turn out and that their blind spots prevented them from recognizing the truth hidden beneath her charming facade. My mother shared similar sentiments, acknowledging the seriousness of her role in dismissing my concerns about Lisa's behavior throughout the years. Her voice quivered as she articulated the pain of understanding how their favoritism toward Lisa had caused significant emotional distress for me. I took this moment to express my gratitude for their willingness to initiate a conversation about forgiveness. I recounted several painful memories that I had endured as a result of Lisa's actions, and my parents listened intently, visibly shocked and dismayed by the extent of my suffering. They recognized the emotional toll it had taken on me and conveyed regret for the feelings of isolation I experienced within my own family. In discussing their favoritism, they reflected on how it clouded their judgment, especially considering that Lisa was an unexpected pregnancy they had come to see as a miracle. As they spoke with sincerity, they pleaded for my forgiveness for all the years lost to misunderstanding and denial. This moment was bittersweet for me. I had longed for acknowledgement from them, yet the path to mending our relationship was fraught with complexity. Nonetheless, it marked a turning point, bringing forth much-needed honesty and clarity that had long been absent from our family dynamic. For the first time in what felt like years, we were genuinely recognizing the issues that had long plagued us. I communicated to my parents that rebuilding trust would take time, and we all agreed to navigate this challenging terrain together. As our discussions continued over the next few days, we resolved to make the most of the time we had together. My parents and I explored the vibrant streets of San Francisco, indulging in leisurely meals and finding joy in each other's company. The journey to reconnect was significant, as we worked to rebuild the bonds that had been strained by years of favoritism and denial. I began to understand that their decision to seek solace with me wasn't simply about escaping the proximity of Lisa, but also a deep desire to restore the family ties that felt close to unraveling. Both my parents and I were in need of a fresh start. Eventually, we confronted the situation with Lisa, who was currently staying with a friend. It became clear to us that we could not simply abandon her, despite the turmoil she had caused in our lives. My parents felt a profound sense of responsibility, recognizing that, even with her unforgivable actions, she remained their daughter. We acknowledged the possibility that Lisa's behavior was not merely rebellious but perhaps indicative of deeper issues. We began to explore the idea of a mental health evaluation to gain a better understanding of her condition. However, since Lisa was an adult, we faced the reality that we couldn't force her into an assessment, and discussions shifted toward finding ways to encourage her to seek help of her own accord. My parents expressed their intention to reach out to Lisa after returning home, hoping to foster a conversation about her situation. As for me, I decided it was best not to initiate contact with her at this stage, as she still harbors a strong grudge against me. The journey ahead felt uncertain, but there was a tentative sense of hope as we navigated these complicated family dynamics together. Lisa continues to harbor intense feelings of resentment toward me, and I am making a conscious effort to avoid exacerbating the situation. My primary concern is her mental well-being, especially in light of previous incidents where her emotions escalated into aggression and violence. To navigate this delicate situation, I have suggested to my parents that they meet with her in a public setting. I believe this environment will help her manage her emotions more effectively, as the presence of others may encourage her to maintain a level of composure. Our main objective is for Lisa to understand our viewpoint and, more importantly, to realize the profound love and concern we have for her. This meeting isn't about pointing fingers or placing blame, it's about coming together as a family to tackle the underlying issues that have created tension and strained our relationships. By showing her that our intentions are rooted in care and support, we aim to foster open communication and healing, which are essential for all of us moving forward. It's crucial that she feels our commitment to her well-being, so we can begin to mend the divides that have formed over time.